Welcome back to another segment of Behind the Scenes of the Waltons. This is a special edition in honor of Father's Day. So to all those fathers out there, happy Father's Day. Of course, on the Waltons, we had any number of fathers in the family. There was Grandpa, who was the father of John and Ben, and at some point they mentioned a third child. So I don't remember all the details of that, but Grandpa was definitely a father. And then, of course, there was John Walton, who had 7 children: John Boy, Jason, Mary Ellen, Ben, Aaron, Jim Bob, and Elizabeth. And then, of course, sadly, he lost a couple children, Jim Bob's twin, and then in later seasons, Olivia was pregnant and lost a child early in pregnancy. So lots of children for John Walton. Then of John's children, John Boy had twins in the very last reunion movie we ever did. And so that brought him into the realm of being a father. So we could say Happy Father's Day to John Boy. Jason had many children by the last reunion movies, and all of them named after country stars, country western singers. Then Ben had Virginia and then Charlie. And of course, those are still the mystery of how did Virginia die and what happened to poor Charlie, who just sort of went poof in the later reunion movies. Sadly, Jim Bob never married, so he never had any children of his own. So that sort of takes care of the immediate Walton family. There were certain characteristics that we came to identify with the parents within the Waltons, Grandpa, John, and then even the Walton children who had children. There was something about what we identified as being a great father, someone who listened, who was caring and loving, who had respect for others above and beyond their own children. They respected their own children, but they respected other people as well, other people's feelings and beliefs and things like that. They were engaged in helping in the community. They supported their family, and they also helped to support other people in the community. They believed in supporting their children and pursuing their children's dreams, not always easily. John at first didn't want John Boy to become a writer. He was just worried about him being able to make a living as a writer. Same thing happened with Jason when he wanted to pursue music. John was simply concerned that he might not be able to make a living in playing music. But ultimately, he backed his children because he believed in them. Mary Ellen, of course, took some difficult paths. Becoming a nurse was not as unusual, but certainly she went through some things doing that. And then he completely backed her when she went through the struggles of wanting to become a doctor. And Jim Bob went through a lot of different things, wanting to join the army, and then the struggles with that, and thinking he had a calling to become a minister, and supporting him when he wanted to do that, and then when he changed his mind about that. So lots of things along the way that we saw with what it meant in how they represented the best of being a father. There were other characters along the journey of the Waltons that became fathers or were fathers that we got to experience. Ike Godsey, of course, he and Corbeth adopted Amy when they couldn't have children of their own. Reverend Fordwick and Rosemary Hunter Fordwick, before John Ritter left the series, he and Rosemary had their first baby. And we felt that the two of them were going to be just wonderful parents, that Reverend Fordwick was going to be just a very, very kind and loving father. Of course, Kurt Willard had John Curtis with Mary Ellen. And although there was that sort of weird Twilight Zone episode that we kind of pretend didn't happen, other than that, he was a great father until he sort of abandoned his child. But as I said, Twilight Zone, and we don't go there. Jonesy then came into Mary Ellen's life and became a stepfather and father figure to John Curtis. And then in later reunion movies, They had 2 children. Katie and Clay. We're not quite sure. It was never identified whether these were biological children, that somehow advances in medicine had made it possible for Mary Ellen to safely have more children, or whether these were adopted children. Never explained, but he was a wonderful father. Then Paul Northridge, Erin's husband, they did have children together, and he seemed to have been a good father, even if he was not the best of husbands. At Bridges, it was referred to that he had children, and then when he and Sarah Griffith got married, they talked about adoption as well, and were going to be adoptive parents. There was also Harley Foster, who we first met when he arrived on the mountain with his son Jody, and later he and Verdi adopted Josh. Some individual episodes that represented different fathers. Paul Mann in the ceremony brought his family over to protect them from persecution in Germany. Dave Pendleton came to Walton's Mountain to find Jenny when she had sort of run away, and when she and John Boy were having that first wonderful love affair, and he seemed like a wonderful father to Jenny. Red Turner we first met in The Gift when sadly his son Seth fell ill and passed away. Later he returned in The Comeback and was still dealing with the grief of having lost his son. Curtis Norton married Anne, and together they adopted a little boy. George Reed in The 5-Foot Shelf was traveling around trying to earn money in order to support his family and his little girl back home, and he really, really hoped to get her this beautiful doll as a gift. Colonel Linville we met originally, Selena's father, in The Thoroughbred, and then he was dealing with this very headstrong daughter, and that sort of came back into play in the season 4 episode, The Collision, when Selena and Colonel Linville were both featured again, when he had then lost all of his wealth and was dealing with how to move forward for him and his daughter. Victor Povich came to support his son Tom in the episode The System, when Tom had been accused of cheating on his school exams, and his father came to support him, and we found out how very proud his father was of Tom. And then we had an opportunity to meet GW's father, George, when in First Casualty, when we found out that GW had died and his parents had to deal with that grief. Willie Brimmer in The Rumor, again, brought his family over from Germany to escape persecution. And he was doing his best to give his family and his children a better life. We met Cindy Walton, Cindy Brunson Walton's father, Colonel Henry Brunson, in the episode The Move. So a chance there to meet Cindy's father. So these were some of the fathers that we met along the way in the various different episodes of the Waltons. I couldn't touch on Father's Day without also mentioning Earl Hamner Jr. and Earl Hamner Sr. Earl's father, of course, had 8 children, including Earl Hamner Jr., who went on to create this amazing family that I was so fortunate to be a part of, and this legacy that we all get to still enjoy and experience. So thank you to Earl Sr. And thank you to Earl Jr. Earl himself had 2 children, Scott and Carrie. And then, of course, to the extended Hamner family, wishing all of you fathers a very happy Father's Day. And to all the fathers out there, my own father, I wish you a very happy Father's Day. And to everyone else out there who is celebrating their own fathers, may you have a wonderful day of celebration. I will be back with more behind the scenes of the Waltons. I want to thank you for joining me for this special edition, and I will see you next time. Thanks for watching.